And we are back for episode 4.9. So our episode begins at the Wall, where Castle Black is preparing for battle. Finally, after waiting a season, the battle for Castle Black is happening. Now in the book, this battle happens just a few days after Jon arrives back at the Wall, after escaping Ygritte and the Thenns. Book Jon, by the way, fights this battle on a crutch. He's still injured from Ygritte's arrow. Now it should be noted that the company that Jon has at the Wall is quite different. Although Grenn and Pip are there, Sam and Gilly are still walking back from the Night Fort. Needless to say, any scene with Sam and Gilly in it doesn't happen in the book. In fact, in this episode, Show Sam is astoundingly different from Book Sam in nearly every scene. Here in the show, we start with him talking about how it's technically okay to bang women and not break one's Night's Watch vow, which is something in the book that Sam certainly doesn't believe. Sam seems to have loads of courage as well, later trying to give some to Pip in one scene. And he even talks about being a man to Gilly and kisses her, something that craven, meek, unmanly Sam would never ever do. In the book, Jon spends much of the battle with an Old Town prostitute named Satin. Satin is a fascinating contradictory character that eventually converts to the old gods and becomes Jon's steward. Now here a skin-changed owl acts as a scout for the southern raiders. In the book, the wildlings south of the Wall have no such scout, though Orell's eagle is still alive north of the Wall and is being used by Mance's lieutenant, Varamir Sixskins. There is a big question to whether one can skin change past the Wall. Jon, for example, cannot sense ghosts when the Wall stands between them. And later in the book, Orell's eagle mysteriously bursts into flames near the Wall, for which we still have no explanation. Melisandre chalks it up to an action by the Lord of Light. Now here in the show, the southern attack with Ygritte and the Thenns, and the northern attack with Mance Rayder are happening simultaneously. In the book, the southern attack happens first, and then the northern attack happens days later, and then lasts over the course of several days. The timing of all of this is actually really interesting when one starts thinking about what's happening with Stannis. We'll get into that a bit later on. Now here in the show, Tormund tells a story about banging a bear, which is a similar story that he tells in the book about fucking a bear that tears off half of his penis. Tormund is occasionally called the husband of bears, and some speculate that Tormund's bear fucking is really a metaphor for him having a child with a woman from House Mormont. Currently in the books, an Alysanne Mormont, whose very presence in the story is rather confusing, is on the way to the Wall where Tormund is. We shall see if this is some sort of family reunion coming up. Anyway, in the book during the Battle of Castle Black, Tormund is north of the Wall, and as I said previously, Gilly is walking back from the Night Fort. Here in the show, she's decided to head to Castle Black at honestly the worst time. Next we have an extra scene where Aemon and Sam talk about love, and Aemon says he once had an experience with a girl. We don't know very much about Aemon's early life in the book, though he does head to the Citadel very, very early, around 9 or 10. So if Book Aemon did know a girl, and we have no idea if he did, he would be definitely breaking his maester vows. Now in the book it's important to note that Aemon sends off ravens for help. None of the lords and ladies of Westeros, even in the north, come to Castle Black's aid. However, the ravens also go to the Watch's strongholds at the Shadow Tower and Eastwatch by the Sea. And quite significantly, this is where Alliser Thorne and Janos Slynt are in the book. Anyway, here in the show, Gilly arrives at Castle Black, and Jon sees that the wildlings have arrived north of the Wall. Everyone starts prepping for battle, and we find that Alliser Thorne is in command. Now in the book, the man who is in command is one-armed Donal Noye. In fact, almost everyone left at Castle Black is an old man or a cripple. There are a few green boys and the villagers from Molestown. The Watch had heavy losses on the Great Ranging, and most of the able-bodied men are pursuing feint attacks at various points along the Wall. This is why Bowen Marsh and Dolorous Edd are not at the Battle of Castle Black in the book. This all eventually leads to Jon taking command of the castle because he's the most capable person. Anyway, then we get some extra scenes with Sam being a man, kissing the girl, and telling Pip to not be afraid. Again, Sam is nothing like this in the book. We then get to see the wildlings north of the Wall who have giants and mammoths. Now, as I said before, the battle for Castle Black takes place over several days, and it actually spans 4 chapters. The first chapter is the assault from the south. The second chapter is the assault from the north over the course of many days, where they try to get through the tunnel. In the third chapter, the wildlings try to build a turtle. And the fourth chapter is the arrival of Stannis. Now, as I mentioned before, Alliser Thorne and Janos Slynt were at Eastwatch by the Sea. In the book, Aemon sends off his ravens when Jon returns. A few days after that, the Battle of Castle Black begins, and several days after that, Alliser Thorne arrives. His arrival is right after the defeat of Mance's turtle, so it's almost certain that Alliser and Janis came to Castle Black in response to Aemon's ravens. Now what's interesting is Stannis arrives just 4 days after Sir Alliser. But here's the thing, Alliser and the Eastwatch reinforcements definitely traveled by the road south of the Wall, where they were seen by Mance's scout, Orell's Eagle. Stannis, though, gets to the scene by using ranger trails north of the Wall. Those trails would certainly take longer than the road along the Wall to the south. Not to mention, an army travels much slower than a small group of men. Considering that Stannis' attack is just 4 days after the arrival of the Eastwatch crew, it would appear that they all left Eastwatch by the sea around the same time. The Eastwatch crew appears to have been a distraction utilized by Stannis. This means that Stannis actually implemented a strategy quite similar to Mance. While Mance used distractions north of the Wall in hopes that his small group south of the Wall would catch Castle Black unaware, Stannis sends a small group south of the Wall to distract his opponents, hoping his large group north of the Wall would catch Mance unaware. Anyway, as in the book, the Night's Watch starts shooting randomly into the crowd and starts killing plenty of wildlings. However, Mance has more wildlings than the Night's Watch has arrows. Now the show has given us an extra plot of Alliser Thorne being a courageous badass, and Janis Slynt being outrageously cowardly. This is actually pretty odd, as Janis Slynt spent his entire career in the City Watch of King's Landing. He would have almost certainly seen battle, such as a riot, and Slynt probably fought in the sack of King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion. Now the show has given us lots of cool mechanisms that don't appear in the book, like horizontal archers. They also give us giant archers and hoardings, something Jon in the book specifically wishes he had. Now, as in the book, the wildlings easily make it into Castle Black from the south. And there's good reason for this. Castle Black is intentionally not defensible from the south. Although earlier in this episode, Alliser Thorne says that the Night's Watch has never fallen, it's actually been taken out several times by the kings of Westeros because of corrupt Lord's Commander. It's uncertain if the Watch has ever been defeated by the wildlings, but the wildlings have certainly gotten past the Watch several times en masse to attack the north. Anyway, next we get an extra scene of Janis Slynt meeting Gilly, and then we have an extra scene of Pip dying in the arms of Sam. Pip actually survives the Battle of Castle Black in the books, and he's alive and well, currently hanging out at Eastwatch by the sea. Next we have a scene of the Watch dropping ice and gravel barrels on the wildlings. This is actually something from the book. The barrels are what destroys Mance's turtle and prevents the wildlings from getting close to the Wall to open the tunnel. Here in the show, we have them instead trying to use a mammoth to pull open the gates. Next, Jon orders Grenn to hold the tunnel. In the book, the tunnel is held by the man in command, Donal Noye, and he then leaves Jon in charge. Dolorous Edd is here at the Wall in the show, though he's off at the Shadow Tower during the battle in the book. However, Pip does make a scarecrow of Edd atop the Wall that gets hit with several arrows. Anyway, next we have an extra boss battle between Tormund and Alliser, two characters who weren't there. And we have an extra scene of Sam killing someone with a crossbow and Ollie getting the elevator for him. Ollie, of course, is a show-only character, though there were some young boys there from Molestown. In our next scene, we have some burning oil dropped on the mammoth that was trying to break the tunnel's gate. Now, this specifically doesn't happen in the book, but I will say that burning oil plays an essential role in the defense of Castle Black. In perhaps a callback to Tyrion and Cersei's wildfire during the Battle of the Blackwater, the men of the Night's Watch put oil bombs along the ice stairs on the Wall. They ignite them and end up killing many of the Thenns, including the leader, Styr. This is essentially the battle-winning play. Anyway, we get some extra scenes of giants dying and hoardings blowing up, and then Jon is called down to sword fight. In the book, Jon is far too injured to fight with a sword. He spends the entire battle shooting arrows. Next, we get an extra scene of the giant Mag the Mighty making it into the tunnel to face Grenn and company. Now, here in the show, he lifts the gate to get inside, but in the book, the giant simply hacks down the wooden door and bends bars before facing the Night's Watch. Now, it may seem odd that the tunnel was completely open in the book, but you have to remember that the tunnel in the book is much smaller and tighter. Bodies blocked the way, and the entrance was partially hidden by a dead mammoth. Anyway, Grenn dies a heroic death here, but in the book, it's one-armed Donal Noye. Grenn is alive and well at Eastwatch by the Sea with Pip. Anyway, next we have an extra scene of Jon sword fighting in a boss battle with Styr, and we have an extra scene of Ghost being released to chomp on some enemies. Ghost is yet another character who is not at the battle. In the book, he is still lost north of the Wall. Essentially, Jon, Pip, Grenn, Styr, and Ygritte are the only characters who are in both book and show battles. Anyway, here in the show, Jon survives getting his head bashed into an anvil, but eventually kills Stur. And then we have the death of Ygritte. Now here in the show, Ygritte hesitates in killing Jon, and Ollie takes her out. This is some justice for Ollie, as Ygritte killed his dad. Now in the book, it's a big unknown on who killed Ygritte. Jon simply finds her shot, and there is some debate on whether or not Jon did it. You see, Jon spends the whole battle shooting arrows. His first arrow has grey fletching, which reminds him of Theon talking about the deadliness of a grey goose feather. Theon, of course, was a master at the bow. But when Jon eventually finds Ygritte's shot, the fletching in her arrow is white, so Jon doesn't think he killed her. Except in the confusion of battle, Jon empties a whole bunch of quivers. He probably wouldn't have known the fletching color of every arrow in the hecticness of battle. Now I do admit that Jon killing Ygritte would certainly make an interesting tale, but it just doesn't seem to be the case. Jon actually spots Ygritte in battle for a second, and then almost immediately starts shooting in other directions, never to return to where Ygritte is found dead. So barring some point of view bias, Jon is likely innocent of the kill. Now, as in the book, Ygritte brings up the cave where the two of them had sex once. Now yes, this cave is sentimental for the two of them, but in the book there is slightly more significance to it. First of all, it's in this cave where Ygritte informs Jon that they are technically married according to wildling customs. Additionally, Ygritte tells Jon that they should never leave the cave right after Jon ejaculates inside her, meaning there is a chance that Ygritte died a pregnant woman. But even beyond the relationship of Jon and Ygritte, the cave is a reminder that tunnels exist underneath the wall. So much attention is given to protecting the wall, and in fact this entire battle and Ygritte's death is about protecting the wall, but we often forget that people, or anything else, can walk right under it. Anyway, we get some last extra scenes with climbers being taken out by Big Hook, Tormund surrendering, and Sam checking in on Gilly and Janis Slynt. And finally, we have an extra scene of Jon deciding that they can't take any more attacks from the wildlings, and he decides to go treat with Mance. Now this is rather different in the book. As I said, in the book, Alliser Thorne and Janis Slynt arrive from Eastwatch by the Sea with reinforcements after days of the Watch defending the wall. Janis Slynt then quite boldly arrests Jon for being a traitor and puts him in an ice cell. After 4 days, they then claim that they wanted to execute Jon, but Maester Aemon prevented it by sending a raven to Cotter Pike at Eastwatch by the Sea. And so for an alternative punishment, they tell Jon that Mance wants to treat with the Watch, and then they order Jon to go over to him, pretend to treat, but then actually assassinate Mance. Now there's a lot that's puzzling about this. Why is Janis Slynt so dead set on arresting and killing Jon, especially when every last man is needed at the wall? How did Slynt get into a position of leadership so quickly? And if Slynt fears Maester Aemon and Cotter Pike enough not to execute Jon, why would he then so boldly send Jon on a suicide mission? And how did Janis Slynt even find out that Mance wanted to treat with them? But most of all, why is this meeting happening now? Isn't it an awfully large coincidence that while Mance and his lieutenants are distracted by Jon, that Stannis attacks? Not that weird coincidences don't happen in the story all the time, they certainly do. But it all does make me wonder if waiting 4 days and then sending Jon out was an intentional distraction to help Stannis gain the upper hand. Remember, it seems that Janis Slynt and Alliser Thorne left Eastwatch by the Sea around the same time as Stannis. Stannis may have told them to create a diversion. Well, whatever the case, it all remains a mystery. And that's all for episode 4.9. See you in episode 4.10.